a stormy night, a top-secret experiment, and a naval destroyer with the power to become invisible. Welcome back, friend, to Hometown History. Some mysteries were perhaps never meant to be solved. The disappearance of D.B. Cooper, the Bermuda Triangle, and the Malaysian Flight 370, to name a few. The longer we go without answers to these questions, the more time the public has to come up with conspiracy theories. And there are some truly incredible ones out there. Not just connected to the cases I mentioned, but other completely random and bizarre ones. The Earth is flat. We never landed on the moon. Steve Jobs is still alive. And the Titanic never sank. But the one we're going to explore today truly takes the cake. Today's episode is about one of the most fascinating conspiracy theories in American history. This is the Philadelphia experiment. The year was 1943, a period overshadowed by the growing intensity of World War II. What is believed is that the urgency that fueled the Philadelphia experiment was born out of the dire circumstances faced by the U.S. Navy during the height of World War II. Basically, German U-boats, better known as submarines, were wreaking havoc on American destroyers, presenting a formidable threat in the waters. These stealthy and deadly vessels, along with the presence of German mines, created a lethal combination that hindered the success of American naval operations. So the American Navy was at a significant disadvantage in the War of the Atlantic, and this meant they needed a strong counterattack, or at least a defense strategy, to maintain their position in the war. Conventional war tactics were proving ineffective against the elusive U-boats, and the unpredictability of mines made navigation much more difficult. Combat and commerce were both in jeopardy, demanding a response that went beyond those traditional strategies. And this is when the U.S. Navy initiated a top-secret program, a program aimed at regaining control of the battle. And with that, in the heart of the Philadelphia Naval Shipyard, an unassuming naval destroyer escort, the USS Eldridge, found itself at the epicenter of a covert experiment that transcended the boundaries of conventional warfare. So, how did it all start? Now, the thing about this idea is that it has a pretty elaborate background, starting from the early 1940s. With the military eager to explore unconventional possibilities, Dr. Franklin Reno applied Einstein's unified field theory to find a solution. This theory, connecting gravity and electromagnetism, laid the groundwork for an experiment that would push the boundaries of reality. The aim? To make a military ship disappear from sight. Now here is where things turned practical, or so it is believed. In the first attempt, apparently the aim was nearly achieved. The USS Eldridge was able to vanish almost entirely, leaving only a wisp of green fog behind. It appeared to vanish from sight, which was exactly what they aimed for. But the after effects were not anticipated. The crew on board suffered severe nausea, and in some cases, insanity when they reappeared. This meant revisions were required. You couldn't have entire troops of men needed for the fight turning insane. So the US Navy recalibrated its approach. They modified their plan and now aimed to make the ship invisible to radar only. With that, the equipment was adjusted, and the second test was initiated. This time, they hoped for a more controlled and successful outcome. So on October 28, 1943, the U.S. Navy attempted something extraordinary, hoping to gain an edge on the ongoing Battle of the Atlantic during World War II. Now, according to reports, the experiment, known as the Philadelphia Experiment, didn't quite go as planned. Instead of mastering time travel, teleportation, and invisibility like they had intended to, the USS Eldridge faced disastrous outcomes. As we discussed, the goal was pretty wild, but also important. To equip American destroyers with the ability to move stealthily through enemy waters, avoiding detection by both radar and underwater mines. If this were a success, it would have been a game-changing advantage in the Battle of the Atlantic, turning the tide of war in favor of the United States. This experiment worked on two goals: defend against the U-boats and navigate hostile territories undetected. The concept of invisibility and undetectability was not merely a technological fascination. It was a strategic necessity, a bold attempt to outmaneuver the enemy and secure a decisive advantage on the maritime front. So on October 28, 1943, the USS Eldridge, equipped with powerful generators, was docked at the Philadelphia Naval Shipyard. This was no ordinary vessel. Equipped with revolutionary technology centered around electrical field manipulation, this ship was said to possess the ability to become invisible to the naked eye. So as the moon cast an eerie glow on the darkened waters, the ship stood as a silent witness to a clandestine operation that aimed to reshape the course of history. With the full crew on board, the experiment began. The generators hummed to life, and unexpectedly, a murky green fog enveloped the ship, making it vanish from sight. Witnesses were left baffled as the Eldridge became invisible, not just to military radar, but to human eyes. Witnesses, including government and military officials, looked on as the USS Eldridge vanished into thin air. The air buzzed with the sound of generators, accompanied by an eerie blue light that enveloped the destroyer before it inexplicably disappeared. The onlookers stood baffled, witnessing an event that seemed to defy the laws of nature. Had the ship been teleported? Was it time travel? Or was it truly invisible? Whatever this was, it was clearly not what the U.S. Navy had in mind when they initiated this experiment. Hey there, history buffs. As we dive into deeper depths of the Philadelphia experiment, let's not forget to indulge in another kind of exploration, the culinary kind. Factor Meals brings the excitement of discovery to your dinner table, with a menu bursting with flavor and innovation. Choose from 35 options every week, plus over 60 add-on options like snacks, on-the-go lunch options, and even breakfast. Savor the flavors of history with each bite, knowing that every meal is a testament to quality and care. Factor Meals are chef-crafted, dietitian approved, and they are fresh, never frozen. All this and ready in just 2 minutes. Taste the thrill of gourmet dining without the hassle. Fuel your passion for history and flavor. Head to factormeals.com/hometownhistory50 and use code hometownhistory50 to get 50% off your first box, plus 20% off your next box. That's code hometownhistory50 at factormeals.com/hometownhistory50 to get 50% off your first box, plus 20% off your next box, while your subscription is active. happened later has been a debate ever since. Reports claim that this ship reappeared mysteriously in Norfolk, Virginia, over 200 miles away, before returning to Philadelphia. People aboard the SS Andrew Forsyth that night claimed to see the USS Eldridge plainly before them, only for it to disappear a few seconds later. It was also claimed that the ship reappeared in Norfolk 10 minutes before it disappeared from Philadelphia, which of course points to either time manipulation or time travel. And with time, more and more conspiracy theories relating to this supposed experiment cropped up. You would expect that the most reliable account would be from the survivors themselves, but things were a little different. Reports from witnesses and survivors painted a grim picture of the toll the experiment took on the crew members. As the ship rematerialized in Philadelphia, it became evident that something had gone terribly wrong. The once hopeful venture turned into a nightmare for those on board. According to the accounts, crew members suffered from severe burns, a result of the unforeseen and powerful forces unleashed during the experiment. The nature of these burns suggests a level of trauma that went beyond the physical, hinting at the untold complexities of the experiment's impact on the human body. Even more disturbing was the revelation that some crew members had become fused into the ship's metal walls at a molecular level. Imagine being stuck inside a wall, parts of your body surrounded by concrete and other parts sticking out of the wall. That's essentially what happened on board the USS Eldridge. This bizarre and nightmarish outcome indicated a level of interaction between the crew and the ship that defied the laws of conventional physics. Those of the men who couldn't free themselves from the metal surrounding them faced gruesome and agonizing deaths. And obviously, the toll extended beyond physical harm. This was nothing short of traumatic. Some crew members who managed to survive the experiment were left in a state of disorientation that bordered on insanity, which is why the reliability of their accounts becomes questionable, leaving things open to speculation. To add to this perplexing aftermath, some crew members simply disappeared altogether. They never rematerialized with the ship. Clearly, the aftermath suffered by the crew was much more severe compared to the first attempt made by the U.S. Navy. It was the opposite of a controlled response. Now, this is what we have been told about the event. All the information presented to us. If you go and check this up online, it'll be easy to find the details and read the records. But should a top-secret experiment funded by the government, which went terribly wrong, really be so easy to access? How did the public learn about the details surrounding that night? When you dig a little deeper into that question, the reality starts peeking through. It started when Carlos Miguel Allende, who was a self-proclaimed witness, started writing letters describing the experiment. These were addressed to Morris Jessup, an astronomer and science fiction writer. And soon Morris Jessup found himself entangled in the web of this story. Carl was allegedly present on SS Andrew Forsyth and witnessed the USS Eldridge on the night of October 28th. Among other things, he claimed that some of the crew members disembarked and came to a local pub, and they got into a bar fight. And during this bar fight, they vanished before his eyes. Now, any good-sensed individual would question this claim, and Carl himself later admitted he was lying. With regard to the reliability of Carl as a person, Robert Goman, an investigative scholar and analyst, wrote in Fate magazine in 1980 that Carlos Allende was actually Carl Meredith Allen from New Kensington, Pennsylvania, who had an established history of psychiatric illness. But it didn't end with that. The story took an unexpected turn when in 1957, the U.S. Navy's Office of Naval Research received a package. It contained one of Morris Jessup's books, adorned with bizarre scribbled notes about extraterrestrial technology and unified field theory. Allende's fingerprints were all over this peculiar package, leading to even more confusion. It turns out the book was annotated with notes in 3 different handwritings, one of which supposedly belonged to an alien. According to these notes, the writer had an advanced understanding of physics and extraterrestrial technology. Even Jessup was confused by this and told the U.S. Navy office that his life had been weird ever since he started getting those letters from Carl about the Philadelphia experiment. Jessup and the U.S. Navy office believed the bizarre notes in the book were made by Carl Allen. One of the conspiracy theories to come out of this story was that Carl himself was an alien, trying to feed information to humans about the experiment. It clearly tells us that the nature of these theories was becoming more and more insane every time a new piece of information or a new witness came forward.
American Criminal is a new true crime podcast from the studio behind American Scandal and American History Tellers. Every week, you'll fall deeper into the riveting stories of the country's most clever, craven, and cruel criminals. Fraud, theft, murder, and worse. Whatever the case, whoever the criminal, you don't know the whole story until now. The debut season tackles one of the most sensational cases of the 20th century, the Menendez murders. In 1989, young Lyle and Eric Menendez brutally shot their own parents. Prosecutors and the press said it was a multi-million-dollar inheritance that led 2 greedy rich kids to murder. But the picture-perfect facade this Hollywood family built hid troubling abuse. Could these teenagers have been driven to kill? Or was it even in self-defense? Listen now. Go to AmericanCriminal.com or search for and follow American Criminal wherever you get your podcasts.
Things got trickier when the news of Jessup's death came in 1959. Apparently, when in Florida, he got into a car accident and was slow to recover, which frustrated him further since his last few books on UFOs hadn't done so well. Then in April of 1959, he was found dead in his car along a roadside in Dade County, Florida. A hose ran from the exhaust pipe into the rear window of his car, which of course filled the interior up with toxic fumes. Was this a suicide? Or did the military orchestrate this because maybe Jessup knew something about the Philadelphia experiment? The conspiracy theories started to roll in. Even though his friends told people that Jessup had been contemplating suicide for a while now, people were convinced that this was yet another cover-up. Much later, another person came forward, claiming that the Philadelphia experiment was real and that he was part of it. In fact, there were too many of these cases happening, mostly because the media couldn't stop talking about it. Everyone wanted to know of it or be part of it. A man named Al Bielek came forward, claiming to have personally taken part in the secret experiment, which he had been brainwashed to forget. He was insistent that only after seeing the movie in 1988 did his repressed memories come flooding back. But as usual, there was no evidence that could support this claim, and he became one of the many conspiracy theorists to have spoken about the experiment. Many people joined this wave of claims, most fabricating their accounts and many of them revolving around time travel. Luckily, some clarification about this experiment came forward in 1994. Astrophysicist and UFOologist Jacques Vallée published an article in the Journal of Scientific Exploration titled Anatomy of a Hoax: The Philadelphia Experiment 50 Years Later. With this, he asks readers to contact him if they had any further information about the alleged event. His interest and curiosity in the matter were somewhat satisfied when he received a letter from Edward Dudgeon, who served in the U.S. Navy from 1942 to 1945. Edward attempted to shed light on the military's attempts to make ships less visible. He acknowledged that the U.S. Navy was, in fact, experimenting with invisibility at the time, but it was not the way the public was making it out to be. The aim was to deal with underwater threats through a process known as degaussing. Since there were repeated attacks by German U-boats, which had caused significant damage until that point, a new approach was being taken. The idea was not to make the ships invisible to radar or in reality. They just wanted to make their ships undetectable by the U-boats' magnetic torpedoes to save them from attacks. This was why the boat was wrapped in large cables and zapped with high voltage charges, making it a degaussed ship. It was simple enough. So his letters clarified that there was no teleportation or time travel or green fog in the works that night, which means that the confusion must have started when whispers of, quote, invisible ships transformed a practical wartime strategy into a paranormal narrative. We all know how these things work. Someone's friend works in the Navy, who then tells another, and so goes on the chain, with things being added at every conversation, much like the game of telephone. The thing that is on our minds can sometimes be biased toward bizarre or otherwise memorable events. For example, we're more likely to remember any mention of things that seem exceptional or weird, like a ship that disappears into thin air with no explanation. There was even an explanation as to how the USS Eldridge was seen in Norfolk that night. According to them, the ship might have traveled from Philadelphia to Norfolk and back in a single day, utilizing the Chesapeake and Delaware Canal and Chesapeake Bay. This route, which was kept discreet, was crucial during World War II, when German submarines posed a significant threat to shipping along the East Coast. To give you some context, the distance between Philadelphia and Norfolk is over 250 miles one way, which would take around 10.5 to 11 hours. A round trip would be 21 hours, which is perfectly doable. Undoubtedly, this explanation made the most sense to the public, providing a logical and rational basis for what happened that night. Plus, as more details came to light, it started looking unlikely that the USS Eldridge was even present in the shipyard during the experiment. Apparently, the ship was not even commissioned until August 27, 1943. Surprisingly, during the alleged October experiment, the ship was on its first shakedown cruise in the Bahamas. But skeptics point out that the ship's logs might have been faked, or maybe they are still classified. There's even an alternative theory suggesting that the USS Hammond was the ship involved in the experiment, arriving at the shipyard on October 20th, 1943. Later in April 1999, a reunion of Navy veterans who had served aboard USS Eldridge revealed to a Philadelphia newspaper that their ship had never made port in Philadelphia. This obviously contradicts the basic premise of the Philadelphia experiment. Adding to this, evidence discounting the experiment's timeline comes from the USS Eldridge's complete World War II action report, including the remarks section of the 1943 deck log, which is available on microfilm. So what does this mean? Was the entire experiment a hoax? That remains a mystery. But it reveals our fascination with the unknown and our inclination towards conspiracy theories. The quest for answers, even in the face of dubious claims, can have profound consequences on individuals and society. Because of this quest, following the initial hype of the event, there have been multiple pieces of literature that were based on it. Considering the intriguing nature of the incident, it became a source of inspiration for various books and movies. In 1965, Vincent Gaddis explored the world of Forteana with his book, Invisible Horizons, True Mysteries of the Sea. Here he recounted the experiment based on the Varro annotations. Basically, Morris Jessup's annotated books, which added a layer of intrigue to the mystery. Fast forward to 1978, George E. Simpson and Neil R. Berger released the novel Thin Air. It was set in the present day, and the story followed a Naval Investigative Service officer uncovering threads that connect wartime invisibility experiments to a conspiracy involving matter transmission technology. It was a direct reflection of the events of the night of October 28, 1943. And then in 1979, the story's widespread popularity surged with Charles Berlitz and co-author William L. Moore's book, The Philadelphia Experiment, Project Invisibility. Berlitz, known for his best-selling work on the Bermuda Triangle, presented the story as a factual account, connecting reports of bizarre happenings, lost unified field theories by Albert Einstein, and alleged government cover-ups, all rooted in the Allende/Allen letters to Jessup. Later, that story was brought to the silver screen by the 1984 film The Philadelphia Experiment, directed by Stuart Raphael. The film explored the concept of time travel, and although loosely based on the original accounts, dramatized the core elements of the story. And the intrigue did not fade away with time. Even as recently as 2012, a film based on the events of the Philadelphia Experiment was released. And I'm sure if Hollywood decided to make another in 2024, we'd want to watch that too, because it feeds the fascination and curiosity we all inherently have. So what do you think? Was this the world's craziest experiment that the government is desperately trying to cover up? Or was it really nothing, and the public is solely responsible for the stories and theories? Let me know your thoughts. Thanks for listening to Hometown History, and be sure to follow along for more interesting stories from America's past.